Today we are going to be talking about the arguments for and against whether or not Pluto is a planet. So, the IAU official definition is a planet must clear the neighborhood around its orbit. Other scientists have talked about classifying a planet by a body that orbits the sun, has enough mass and gravity to make it round, um, having the object not be a satellite of another object. A satellite, could also be a moon, and it also would have smaller objects around its orbit. So, a little background on Pluto. The first person to want to find Pluto at the time, called Planet X, was Percival Lowell. He started his research as a mission to find life on Mars, and when this failed, he instead searched for Planet X. His research was then passed down to Clyde Tombaugh, who was a farm boy from a one-room schoolhouse, and he used a blank comparator to look at slides to find Planet X, and eventually he did find it. Naming Pluto was really interesting because at first this wasn't a popular name because it was known as a laxative. But Disney made it popular again with the beloved pet dog of one Mickey Mouse, and I found a really fun picture that had Pluto with Pluto the dog's face on it. So the argument for Pluto being a planet starts with its shape. It's round, not potato-shaped like all other asteroids. It's round like a planet would be. It also has bright and dark areas on the surface, just like other planets, and it does have objects that are orbiting, uh, that are that fly around in its orbit. It actually has 3 moons: Charon, Nix, and Hydra. Charon's actually quite large and almost the same size as Pluto, but we'll get to that in a couple slides. So Alan Stern is actually one of the biggest supporters of Pluto being a planet. He believes that the IAU definition confuses people because Pluto is in an area that's very crowded. It doesn't have enough mass to clear a path and to separate things from its orbit. So in that way, it doesn't meet the new IAU definition. But Alan Stern doesn't believe that this is important because the definition that they give relies on location. And in his belief, location is for realtors, not scientists, because it's all on happenstance of where these objects end up in our solar system. The New Horizons was the first exploration of something like Pluto, which Alan believes that Pluto is in an entirely new section of planets known as dwarf planets. And the New Horizons mission in 2015 was the first exploration of Pluto and its area, making Pluto and other dwarf planets more understood. Again, we'll get to those dwarf planets in a couple more slides. But the arguments for it not being a planet are that it is extremely small. It has less than the mass of the moon, and most scientists believe that it's far too small to be considered a planet. It also has a really interesting, weird orbit. It has the most tipped orbit of any planet, and it's highly elliptical, not circular like the other planets. And because of its tipped orbit and its highly elliptical orbit, it actually crosses the orbit of Neptune, which is unlike any other planet. Again, it highlights that idea that it has that crowded neighborhood, and therefore the new IAU definition doesn't classify it as a planet. But this idea of double planets isn't really super foreign. We do have double stars, stars that orbit each other, so the idea that Pluto orbiting another planet like it does with Charon, its moon, wouldn't be totally out of reach. So with Pluto and its moon Charon, yes, it crosses the path of Neptune, but it also is orbiting around Charon, and Charon is orbiting around Pluto. So, that idea of double planets isn't completely off because we do see that with stars. Um, so, the Kuiper Belt was first an idea that was introduced. Pluto being a part of the Kuiper Belt was first an idea that was introduced by Mike Brown. Um, Pluto, at the time that this was being theorized, was the largest in the Kuiper Belt. Um, but Mike Brown wanted to find an object that was bigger than Pluto. He eventually does, and he calls it Aries, but he doesn't feel right also calling this new object a planet, so he brings it up to the IAU, and through the new definition of the needing a not crowded neighborhood, it demotes Pluto to not being a planet. Instead, they think that it is just simply leftovers from the solar system formation, like the other objects in the Kuiper Belt. But why is this so inconclusive? Well, we have variations in the solar system, um, so it's hard to set hard and fast rules. Um, like Pluto has these 3 moons, and that could be one way to classify a planet, but Mercury and Venus don't, and we consider them planets. Again, that double planet theory comes into account where, there are stars that orbit each other, so why couldn't planets orbit each other? And in that way, Pluto could be considered a planet. Um, the only time that we've been to visit Pluto, I put air quotes around visit, there was the New Horizons mission, which did open up a lot of doors for research into Pluto, but it wasn't necessarily, we can't be there, we can't take photos all the time like we can of other planets, and we can't necessarily understand Pluto more, which is why that idea of a dwarf planet has been introduced. That we have the planets we have, but we also have this other section of all these other dwarf planets that are just small. And why are they so small? Well, planetary formation forms from the bottom up, so dwarf planets stay in the mid stage of planetary growth. They're essentially planetary embryos, and they just needed more material, and why they didn't have it, we don't really know. Um, but that's another reason why it's inconclusive, because we don't have enough research on those dwarf planets to really know, okay, well, are they really planets? Um, and, again, to keep in mind that the people who began to set these rules also thought we had an Earth centric solar system. So, introducing dwarf planets and classifying Pluto as a planet, or classifying Aries as a planet, or not classifying is just another step in solar system discovery. And I think with those steps, scientists are going to have to make the decisions for themselves in the modern day as to whether or not they want to make these new discoveries or these new hard and fast rules. And then here are just, one meme about Pluto, and then 2 different pictures that were taken. So thank you for listening, and I hope it was informative.